This episode of Lawyers Tell All is brought to you by Law Firm Conversions. If your law firm's phone is ringing, that only means your marketing is successful. It's what happens when the phone is answered that will drive your success or failure. Visit www.intakeacademy.com and claim your free copy of Chris Mullen's groundbreaking book for lawyers and law firms that gets every call converting to become a profitable client, showing you the steps you need to take to ensure the right person is answering the phone and answering it correctly. Welcome to the Lawyers Tell All podcast, where Chris Mullins, the preeminent sales and communications consultant in the legal industry, shows you how it looks through lawyers' eyes. Here, innovators in the trenches provide powerful insights that help you connect with new clients, handle the sometimes harsh realities of the legal profession, and embrace the mindsets needed to succeed. Be sure to visit our website at www.lawyerstellall.com. And while you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, lean in, tune in, and let's take a deep dive.
Hello, everyone. It's Chris Mullins with Lawyers Tell All, and today I'm interviewing Michelle Bomberger, and I'm going to let Michelle tell you about herself.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Michelle Bomberger. I own Equinox Business Law Group here in the Seattle, Washington area. We've been doing this for about 20 years and have a small team. We have 4 attorneys, 3 staff, and then a small team in the Philippines that supports our project management administrative work. So it's been an interesting journey to get there. Prior to starting Equinox, my background is mostly in business. So I was an IT and process consultant with Ernst & Young, and then in the internal audit group at AT&T Wireless before kind of jumping off and doing my own thing.
Yeah. So what happened when you decided, okay, I got to go do my own thing?
You know, I attribute it to a really amazing woman that I worked with at AT&T Wireless. She was there while I had my first child and I was looking at flexibility, and she kind of offered me that. And then when AT&T Wireless was acquired by Singular in 2004, we just didn't know what was going to happen with our jobs here in Seattle. And she said, you know, you've kind of talked about this thing, you know, maybe you should go do that. And interestingly, I hadn't ever kind of formally practiced law at that time. And so I did a lot of learning and a lot of visioning and jumped in.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us about what your business is.
Sure. So as I mentioned, we do an outsourced general counsel. So the idea that large companies have a general counsel, and most small businesses don't really think about that. They don't think about whether they need one or how it works or what the value of legal is in their business. And so a lot of the work that we do is around why legal matters as a strategic tool as well as a tactical tool. And most businesses look at it as a tactical tool and an expense to be reduced and minimized at all costs. And so we started to think about how, you know, what are the barriers to using legal? And obviously the unknown, unpredictable cost is one. The lack of responsiveness that a lot of small businesses get from lawyers when they call. And the lack of business value that they maybe perceive from it. And so those were sort of the foundations for trying to build a model that encouraged the phone call, encouraged engagement, encouraged proactive rather than discouraging it. And so we built a fixed fee, all-inclusive solution that works for small and mid-sized businesses.
So give some examples on who your client is.
Sure. I think from a broad brush standpoint, the things that are most important are a leadership team with a growth mindset. So folks who typically they're using coaches, they're using peer advisory groups, they're using outsourced HR, they're using outsourced CFOs. They know they can't do it by themselves. They know they need help. And so that is really important because they're already engaging probably with lawyers, just not in a way that works for them, works for their business. And then the second thing is that they have enough what I call moving parts, right? There's got to be stuff happening. If stuff's not happening on a regular enough basis, they aren't going to need an ongoing relationship that is constantly kind of looking ahead and at least not at the level that we can I think that they could justify financially. So some examples, we have a company that is in the food manufacturing industry, and we've worked with them as they have grown their team. They've implemented technology systems, they've built out their leadership team, offered different kinds of incentive programs, and done a lot of sort of contracts work with them. So there's the three big ones that we deal with a lot are governance, employment, and contracts. Another great example is a staffing company that we helped them grow to 5 states and build out, again, out their leadership team with incentive programs. But staffing is great because they have a lot of employment issues. They have their internal team as well as the team that's sitting at the client site. And they also have a rapid turnaround need for contracts. So contracts are, getting things moving, because if they don't move the ball quickly, the client's going to go somewhere else. And so that's another industry that this really works well for, because we can be responsive and we know them inside and out.
Mm-hmm. So when you talk about tactical and competitive advantage, tell me more about that.
Sure. So, if a company knows that, they plan to do something a year from now, and hopefully, most are at least looking far enough ahead to say, here's where we think we're going to be, we can then start to plan what needs to change, right? So we need to build this, what I call legal infrastructure in the business. And that might be, planning for employment-related compliance in multiple states. It might be adjusting contract terms to address a new product line or service line that they're offering. And so helping them to see that this business plan that they have in mind has these different legal repercussions. And by giving them a runway to think about that and implement that, then we can give them the confidence that when they go live, they have that already in place. And so it's helping them to troubleshoot an issue spot before they've already done it, which is the typical way it works. Right. Is that they're calling us after they've done it, and we're trying to clean up stuff in the back. They've already issued contracts to a bunch of people that don't really do the job. They've already hired people. They haven't done it quite right. So we are able to help them see ahead.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if, so more of a preventative measure, right? And so are you part of their marketing meetings and growth meetings and our plans for the next few years, and part of all those conversations to help them see what they don't see?
Yeah, it certainly depends on what the client finds valuable. Most of the time, we do a 30-minute meeting with whoever on the leadership team is our point people. Sometimes it's only the owner, sometimes it's the owner and one of their executive teams. Sometimes they'll bring in the marketing person. So it just depends, but it is a monthly meeting that helps us to stay in touch with what's happening there. And it shifts over time.
Mm-hmm. And do you ever get in that position where you're kind of like actually making recommendations on different things that they should be doing? Like, well, you say you want to focus on this, but I think you might want to go over here instead, and here's why.
It's a great question. There are a lot of times where they're like, just tell me what to do. I'm like, well, we can't really tell you what to do. That's not our job. Mm-hmm. But I do think that we're really helpful in giving them a context of risk that they don't otherwise have, right? So I think it's grounding to say, here's what we see, which will help them make a decision. And sometimes we can say, if I were you, if it were, me sitting in that chair, here's the way I would think about it. And here's what I would probably do. But ultimately, It's your call.
Right. But do you find yourself in a position too where you're giving them like ideas, things to think about?
100%. I think that's one of the huge benefits of the fixed price is that they will call. I remember one time client called and they were doing the kids were leading the operations of the company, and the parents still had ownership, and they were buying out the rest of the parents' ownership. And the one of the kids called and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about financing this through the bank rather than just paying cash for it. We have the cash, but I think financing would be better. What do you think?" I remember thinking, it's interesting that you're calling me for that.
Yeah, right.
Um, But again, they're looking for what are the risks that might not be obvious to them, right? And what are the opportunities that might not be obvious to them? And so we build a different kind of relationship because we are, as you mentioned, an extension of the broader management team.
Yeah, right. Where'd you come up with the name for the business?
Oh, I love that question. So I am not the creative in the world, and so when I first started the business almost 20 years ago, I came up with Small Business Legal Services, which was named somewhat after the clinic that at Northwestern when I was in grad school. It was one of the first clinical environments for business transactional work, and it was called, Small Business Opportunity Clinic. And I didn't ever want it to be about me, so it was never going to be the Bomberger law firm. But I'm also not creative, and it was about 2009-ish. And I had a couple people on the team. It was a very small team. And we were brainstorming ideas to get out of the idea of being small business. We had a couple clients who made sort of a comment about it that when you're sending a nasty letter to someone, is that really, the message you want to send? And it was actually one of my employees who came up with it. And she said, "I always love the word. It's got this, it's got the X and the Q, and it's kind of a funky word."
Yeah.
But where we landed was, at the time, our messaging was really about balancing business and law. And the equinox is the tipping point. It is that balance right before light and dark tips one way or the other. And so we used it as a balance analogy.
Okay. What are some of the things that businesses can find themselves in trouble with by not having counsel like yours?
Yeah, as I mentioned, there are three areas that are really common that we work with folks on. I think ownership is more proactive. So I think they find themselves less in trouble and more just maybe lost in those cases. Just how they structure their ownership, how they deal with someone leaving, making sure that that's just all planned out well. I think that's a big one. The ones that end up getting folks more in trouble, I think, is employment. Employment is a rapidly changing state by state plus federal world, and it's really hard to keep up. And in the post-COVID, we can hire people anywhere world. I think folks are really kind of backpedaling and trying to figure out how to fix all of the stuff they did. So we're helping folks with that a lot, and it's one of the more black and white areas of business law. And then I think contracts, I think there are two or three kind of key things. One is people feel they can't redline, they can't negotiate, they can't make changes to them, which is false. Yeah, they're also afraid they're going to, lose out on the opportunity if they push back too much. And so I think we can help guide them with that. And then I think in a similar vein, people are pulling contracts from friends, they're pulling contracts now from ChatGPT. And they don't really know what they're looking for. And I think they're really good at the business terms, but all of that kind of legal, quote unquote, boilerplate in the back is super important, as we know. And they don't really know what they don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking like you would say employment and because like even like all the virtual people that we're hiring in other countries.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and you have folks in the Philippines, and I mean, what should businesses do that kind of went crazy with COVID, but now they're finding like they actually feel like they need to keep it that way, but now they don't know what to do as far as contracts and formalizing it and protecting themselves and non-competes and confidentiality. Like, what about all that, especially with the international? I mean, what do we do?
Yeah, I think for employees, we'll start there. you need to really understand the rules in each state. And the rules include, do you need to register not only as an employer, but do you need to register as a foreign entity in those states? And that's a step that's often missed. So now you're on the radar of that state. And so what do you need to do? And then within that state, every one of them has different rules around leave, around payroll, around, ADA. Like there's all kinds of things that each state has, and you need to know what those are. And then decide how you want your policies and handbook to look. Is the handbook like the lowest common denominator, which is, we have people in California, so we're just going to start with California's baseline and everybody gets that, or an addendum for each state? Like that's a good example. I think internationally, I personally would advocate for going through an agency rather than hiring direct. For us, especially for us as a law firm, it's really important that we have really secure systems, that we have, accountability by a U.S. company with respect to confidentiality and, data security. Like there's so many things that I think we need to make sure are buttoned up. And I personally don't want to be on, the hook for not properly paying some sort of, pension or whatever in the Philippines I didn't even know about. I just don't think that I can do that well.
Yeah. Okay. So what about law firms? Do you have law firms as clients?
We do. We have a few law firms as clients. We have a lot of other professionals, doctors, architects, other licensed professionals as well. Yeah.
And what kind of law firms? Like what practice areas?
It varies. We have a family law firm. We have a data privacy firm. We have an employment and civil litigation firm.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it matters as much the kind of practice.
Right.
The business itself is the same. I think the challenges are, I think more and more firms are looking at, how do you get a broader reach? And with licensing requirements, it's really limited as to like, how do I work with a client in Arizona when I'm not licensed in Arizona, right? So the way the licensure rules are, and so folks trying to figure out, with a national and global marketplace, how can we do more given the rules? And it's really limited in looking at the RPCs state by state on what the temporary practice of law means in some of those other areas. That's something we've found more recently, and then looking at of-counsel relationships and other things like that for expansion.
Yeah. So coming up with ideas on how to help the law firm grow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really good. And I'm curious, could you work with law firms to help them sell their business or position their business in a way that they are able to sell it?
Absolutely. We do a lot of M&A transactions, and professional services firms are kind of primed for that because they're, relatively easy in the grand scheme of things to acquire. It's the client base and the employees and, sometimes the IP that goes around with that. But being ready for it, you just mentioned prepare. I think being ready for it is really important, and getting folks, I think, emotionally ready for due diligence and the roller coaster of the process itself is a really important role that we can play.
Yeah, it's interesting when you said the word emotional. So
yeah, it really is.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think a lot of people think of legal as and then the word emotional. So although I in my business deal with a lot of emotional, right?
That's right.
Teaching intake specialists to convert and teaching attorneys to communicate with clients. And it's a lot of emotional stuff. So yeah, that's really interesting. What would you like everybody to know before we say so long?
Well, I would share with you all that we have a business health assessment on our website. And this is something that's really for businesses to take. It takes about 7 minutes to complete, and you get a 30-page-ish report that says, hey, here are the things you should be thinking about. And so it's a great tool for businesses to use in their own planning, as well as working with any other advisors that you're talking with, a coach, a banker,
Yeah.
a CPA. It just gives a good framework. And so that's a great tool. I encourage you to check it out. And then I'm happy to be a resource to anyone. You can find me on LinkedIn, and you can also find me on our website at equinox.law. There's a contact page there.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Well, so long, everyone. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Lawyers Tell All, where Chris Mullins takes you on a journey with lawyers in the trenches who show you the realities of what it takes to succeed in this chaotic, crowded, ever-changing profession. Remember to visit our website at www.lawyerstellall.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on Lawyers Tell All.